Hi Australia. It's great to work with you, as we've been doing with our colleague Rory Gallagher over with you. I'm just going to say a few moments about our approach and what we're doing here in the UK and increasingly with you guys also in Australia and in New Zealand. So what's the point of Behavioural Insights and how do we use it in policy? The essence of it is quite a simple idea, which is if we had a more sophisticated model of what it is that drives human behaviour, what drives judgments of risk, and what actually drives what people do, we might make better policy which is easier and more effective and often more cost effective too. So the idea is simple. The coalition government in Britain, particularly in 2010, brought this idea forward, and the idea that we would support and help people to make better choices for themselves, as the way it's often expressed. And that essentially has been our brief for the last 2.5, nearly 3 years now. What's been great is that we've had lots of fantastic results. And there's two kinds of things essentially we do. One is quite nuts and bolts changes, some of which have been quite long in the making. So we've recently, in fact, last year, we changed the defaults on pensions so that we moved from an opt-in system to an opt-out for essentially employer pensions. And this is leading to, it looks like about 90% of people staying in and having pensions. It's a remarkable result, something which people have wrestled with for literally decades to get the savings rate up. And by changing the default, we're getting this remarkable effect. So we're not the only ones in the world to do this, but it's still pretty powerful and gratifying to see it working. But other examples, we run lots of randomized controlled trials to test different effects, range across domestic policy. So one of the major areas of success has been changing tax letters when people are written to. Our tax authorities write literally millions of letters a year. And essentially what we found is that quite small changes in the wording. So just, for example, telling people something that's true, most people pay their tax on time, turns out to be a really effective way at encouraging people to then go on and pay their tax. Or even a small variant on it, to say most people in your area have paid their tax and you are one of the few who has yet to pay. Turns out to be a very effective way generally of increasing compliance and tax rates. And interestingly, also reduces numbers of complaints as well. So it's been really, again, dramatic series of results. The marginal cost is almost zero, and it's now bringing in literally hundreds of millions more in forward payment on tax in the UK. Another couple of quick examples, and I'll give you a different type of problem which we also look at, more structural. Is on insulation. So why don't people insulate their homes in Britain? It's more than a third of people. A lot of people have insulated, but more than a third still have yet to do so. And we concluded the answer wasn't just more money, but it was a hassle to do. And when we ran a study, essentially offering people, in one condition, even bigger discounts, that didn't make much difference. But when we offered a scheme which was a loft clearance or attic clearance scheme, and where someone will come to the house, you have to pay for it, it's quite an expensive service, and they were to come and take the stuff out, and all those things that you should have thrown away years ago, they actually bring them down, and then you sort them and say, throw this away, give this to charity, actually I want to keep this. It led to an increase, when it was done at cost, of nearly 5-fold in the uptake of insulation. So it wasn't more money that was necessary, it was really addressing the underlying behavioural issue. And one more in this sort of spirit, which Rory actually Gallagher's was very involved in and continues, is on employment. So changing what happens in job centres. So a series of quite specific changes around particularly how the contract operates. So instead of asking people, to prove they've looked for at least 3 jobs in the previous 2 weeks, instead to say, what are you going to do in the next 2 weeks? And to prompt people as specifically as possible. What are you going to do, when, how, etc. So after I've taken my kids to school on Wednesday, I'm going to get on such and such a website and I'm going to look for retail jobs in Essex. Turns out to be quite effective. So I won't go through the whole list of changes, but it was leading to 10 to 20% increase in the number of people who were off benefits at 13 weeks. So a really strong result, which we're now essentially seeking to replicate on a much larger trial across a wide chunk of the UK. So a lot of it's quite nuts and bolts, it's very practical, and it's those kind of results which have persuaded, we're often quite sceptical public servants initially in the UK. But there's one kind of other area which we do is sometimes it's not just a specific issue. You can use those same kind of insights in terms of changing almost policy more fundamentally or structurally. So just to give you one example of that, in many areas we find that markets don't work perfectly, even if they're competitive in a formal sense. So this is often where there's a lot of friction or difficulties in working out what's the right thing to do. So an example would be mobile phones. You know, in the UK there's many millions of alternative phone network combinations. Are you on the best tariff? Well, who knows? If consumers, on the other hand, had access to their own transaction data, this is a game changer. So to jump to another area, energy markets. Most people don't care that much about where their energy comes from. But the basic idea is, you know, would you know what tariff you're on, and do you know whether you use more electricity at night relative to other people? Most people don't. But if on your electricity bill it had a QR code with your data and information, you can just hold your phone up against it and it will say, David, the best tariff for you is the following. Would you like to change? You can click and it happens in a few moments. You can see straight away why that's a game changer in how markets operate. So rather than trying to do tariff control, we just make it much, much easier, and it makes people able essentially to be econs in the kind of textbook model as opposed to the normal human beings that we are most of the time in how we make decisions. Anyway, in the UK we found that these kinds of approaches have been incredibly promising across a wide range of domestic policy areas. My understanding is the results, as I've seen them so far from Australia, are coming through in quite a similar way, very promising. So good luck with it. We really look forward to hearing more, and we've really enjoyed working with you and indeed other countries increasingly. Take care.